This is the Brett Snodgrass podcast, and I am Brett Snodgrass, the one and only. If you've heard a different Brett Snodgrass, then that's not him, because I am the real Brett Snodgrass. Please stand up. Today, I have a guest on this show, Dr. Eric Weiss. Before I introduce him, if you like what we're doing here on the Brett Snodgrass podcast, go check out the Brett Snodgrass channel. Where's it at? I'm glad you asked. It is on YouTube. Just Google or type in on YouTube the Brett Snodgrass channel and check it out. We come out with videos every single week. Podcast. We're going to be coming out with some teaching videos, some fun videos, character videos. It's going to be amazing. So check it out. Leave a comment. I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can. Today's guest, Dr. Eric Weiss out of Florida. Typically, I introduce entrepreneurs all over the nation. We talk about success with significance. We talk about purpose. We talk about life, business. Dr. Eric Weiss is actually a plastic surgeon. Just saying that word kind of intimidates me, but Dr. Eric Weiss, a very humble man, and him and his wife, Christine, they have a plastic surgery center in Florida, but they have just written a book. It's titled Educating Marston, a Mother and a Son's Journey Through Autism. So is this interview about business, about how to open up a plastic surgery center and kind of hear Dr. Eric's story? It is. We kind of start off with that, but it's mostly about this book because when Christine and Eric started their family, they had a son that was diagnosed with autism. Well, as you can imagine, as a plastic surgeon, a doctor, you want to try to fix everything, and even as a man, but they couldn't quite fix this, and they had to go through their journey of how can they teach and educate and live a life to the fullest with their autistic son, Marston. That's where this book kind of came in. They learned so many lessons through the journey, and I know that I have children, and you have children, maybe, and this is an interview about parenting, and it's about really the ins and outs of the brain and how to parent a child with a disability, specifically with a mental disability like autism or ADHD or any of the like. And I have a son that has ADHD. So this really hit home with me. And there's one section that really took just a hold of me, and just some science behind what we can do as parents to help out our disabled children. Let's check out our interview with Dr. Eric Weiss. What's going on, Eric?
Not much. Glad to be on the show, and here ready to talk about my wife and I's book, and maybe autism and anything else anybody's interested or questions you ask.
Yeah, definitely, guys. This is just a show that I've really been looking forward to. We talk a lot of entrepreneurs and business people and how to balance families and right that struggle that we all kind of go through. But today, Eric and his wife Christine, is it Kristen or Christine?
Christine.
Christine Weiss have written a book, like I mentioned. It's called Educating Marston, a Mother and a Son's Journey Through Autism. And Eric is also a plastic surgeon, and he's actually between surgeries right now, so we're not going to keep you too long here, Eric. But it's not every day that I get to talk to a plastic surgeon, so I'm going to say I'm a little intimidated, but not too much. But Eric, thank you so much for just putting out this book and what this means. And like I said, it's a little bit of a different show, and really want to dive into what it's like to parent a child with autism. And you as a doctor, you've, backed by science, you've had some amazing discoveries too with that. But kind of before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and, you own your own business, plastic surgery center in Florida. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, as I like to say, I grew up in central West Coast Florida, fishing, running around playing baseball, ended up going to Davidson College, majoring in chemistry there, then off to Duke University Medical School. Then I did general surgery at University of California, San Francisco, and University of California, Davis, East Bay, and then University of Miami for plastic surgery. I had the good fortune of the United States Navy sending me to medical school. So I joined the Navy, and then in '98 I got out and opened up my own practice, and I've been practicing plastic surgery ever since. And all the ins and outs of running a small business, from hiring people to ordering stuff and operating on people in between.
Yeah, yeah. What was that like? I mean, kind of going from a plastic surgery, being an amazing plastic surgeon, as I'm sure that you are, but going from that to actually running a center, right? What's that
I
like?
think it was actually a bigger transition than operating on people. When you get on the treadmill and in medical school, everything's kind of gradually fed to you until all of a sudden 11 years later you poke your head out and you're ready to operate. Uh, but in medical school, there's no business courses. And early on in residency, when you're learning how to operate, I was once told if you ever catch yourself thinking something's wrong, I'll do the thinking, you do the responding,
Mm.
and when you get as old as me, then you can do the thinking. But then all of a sudden, then I joined the Navy, and obviously big institution, and then all of a sudden I was out of the Navy, and you need a banker, you need a lawyer, you need a CPA, you need an insurance guy, you need property, you need to get your eventual office accredited, in the state, nationally, and you're not really prepared for any of that, or even hiring people or firing people, and so you end up making mistakes, but you learn as you go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's just like any business. But tell us about your plastic surgery center out of Florida right now. Like, do you have other plastic surgeons that work in the center, and what do you
No,
guys do?
I'm a solo practitioner, which is pretty rare. But I like to think of, when my patients come here, they get my cell phone number. So in the middle of the night when they have to call somebody, they're not, the on-call guy's me, unless I'm out of town. But usually I still answer the phone, and I have obviously friends who are plastic surgeons, and we share call, and I do anything and everything from breast reconstruction to the aesthetics, from tummy tucks and breast augmentations. But I'm also the head of a plastic surgery at a trauma center. And so, when people get hit by cars or interpersonal violence or dog bites to the face or any of a number of type injuries, we support the neurosurgeons, the orthopedic surgeons, the general surgeons, who needs, some type of plastic surgical help.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, and your wife, Chris, I think that's you guys call her Chris for
Yeah.
short. So your wife,
Uh-huh.
Chris, she seemed like she was also very successful. She worked in some companies, some businesses, and did some fashion, did worked in the food industry as well. So talk to us about kind of what she was doing before you started your family.
Well, I actually met at a summer job, in the hospital, and I took the lowest job you could possibly take, which was, putting food on a food tray in the cafeteria. And she was, a dietitian, so she was my boss at the time, and I said that she was kind of cute, and she didn't even know who I was, but over the years, I finally convinced her to start dating me, and eventually ended up marrying her. But she went from a registered dietitian, and then she became a dietitian at Duke when I was there, and then an assistant, I guess, a sous chef at a convention center associated with Duke, where she got more into the ordering food and the preparing the food. And then when I went out to San Francisco, she became the head of executive dining for Bank of America.
Mm.
And so she was up real early. I was going to the hospital. She was going to the Bank of America building to make sure that food was ready early in the morning when the stock market opened.
Mm.
Uh, that just a chance meeting at a wedding to an executive in the fashion industry. And they just started talking, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd be wonderful doing this and that." And she goes, "Oh, I'd love to do that. I don't want to get my hopes up." And he said, "No, I'm offering you the job. You'd be working for me." And so she took the job, and so she left kind of the food industry and went into the fashion industry, and was working for the Esprit company, which was headquartered in San Francisco. And then from there, opened up her own, from her own boutique to her own lines of repping, different clothes through the fashion industry, having showrooms in, LA and New York and San
Wow.
Francisco.
Wow. So like you guys are the power couple, super busy. Sounds like she's busy, you're busy, and you're doing the plastic surgery. She's working in her company, corporate world, and then you guys decide to start a family, right? And that's kind of where this journey starts to begin. And we're going to dive into this book here, but talk to us about that. So you have two sons now. You also have a godson that you guys have helped take care of. But
Right,
talk to us about your
right.
family.
Austin's our oldest. He's 31, 32 now, just turned 32, I think. Um, he was born while we were in San Francisco, and couldn't have been a better kid growing up. We would turn around when he was 2 years old, and he would have tucked himself in bed and gone to the bed for the night. And we couldn't believe that other parents had trouble raising kids, because it was just like,
It's a breeze.
right. We thought all the kids were that way. And when we moved up here to Ponte Vedra, where I live now, his best friend, William Abernathy, just lived a couple doors down, and through a variety of things, ended up, staying with us more and more, and then became one of the family, which really worked out well, because at this time we had Marston, our youngest, and it became apparent that Marston was having issues growing up, and he's the one that the book's about, educating Marston, because he ended up being on the autistic spectrum, and my wife at that time was helping me in my practice, and then she stopped working and became a full-time mom, and had to start educating Marston, which led to the name of the book and the book itself.
Yeah. So when did you guys? You see, he had Marston, and that's where we're going to dive into this book. But how old was Marston when you guys were thinking, hey, maybe something's a little bit different with Marston?
Well, I think as a second time parent, you pick it up even earlier, because he was just missing milestones that our first son, didn't. He didn't walk as much, certainly didn't talk. And he had some coordination problems, and just wasn't right. And Chris took him to the pediatrician, and nobody really wants to give bad news, and so you just think, let's just wait and watch. Every kid has his own time frame for when they start doing things, but it soon became apparent that his time frame wasn't right. Not only was he missing his milestones, there were some other things that were going on, and so that's when we started looking into the specialty stuff. And probably at 18 months to 21 months, as we became acutely aware that something was wrong, and we got the diagnosis.
So it was literally pretty early then, 18 to 21 months, that there was a doctor that said he was on the autistic spectrum?
Correct. Yeah. And that wasn't up here. We had taken him, because we had come from Miami, so I was very familiar with Miami Children's Hospital. So I had him evaluated down there by the neurology department. They're the ones that told us.
Wow. So when you guys heard that news, I want to maybe ask you, and then also, you can talk about Chris too, but what was your feelings at that time, right? I mean, you had this one son, and everything was just kind of a breeze, right? And he was doing everything and passing all the milestones, and now you had this second son, Marston, who, right, is different. I mean, and then you're thinking about the future. So what was some of your thoughts?
Well, I think the first thing is, denial, is that, everything's going to be okay. They don't know what they're talking about, and then it's kind of shock. It's almost, I equated it, somebody tells you somebody died, or you're going to die, you have a terminal disease. The first thing is denial. And then you gradually work into, I can work through this, and then acceptance. And then you start to realize that, life is going to be different from here on out. And it's going to affect the family. It's going to affect our other, son and godson, and then just try to figure it out. Because I think a lot of people, end up heading toward divorce when they have, a special needs kid, because it's so taxing on the marriage.
Actually, I was talking to one of our friends, and she has a child that's kind of on that spectrum, and she had gotten divorced. And I was talking to her about our child. We mentioned I have a son who's diagnosed with ADHD, and he's 7 years old, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But she said, yeah, that was a big reason for that divorce, was because of her son. It was such a struggle. Um,
And a lot of
so,
times the moms pick up the slack, but it's the fathers that I see that have the issue,
mhm.
and they're just not, it's difficult. And I'll be the first to admit, it was my job to make the money so that Chris could take, Marston to therapy and different specialists. And so I wasn't, as hands-on as she was.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, at this time, did she say, "Hey, I'm not going to work anymore"? She was helping you, but she decided she was going to stay home, right? And then
Correct.
stay home. And
Right.
she hadn't been doing that. I mean, for years. It sounds like she was working and a career woman, and then now, what was that like for her?
It's interesting because I think that, well, obviously it was a huge life change. And I think that, um, women in general, will do anything for their child, and so, and Chris in particular, because Chris grew up with a special needs sister. And so she saw her mother drop everything and take care of her daughter, Chris's sister. And this was a sister closest in age to Chris. And so, for her whole formative years from, elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, she saw her mom have to take care of her sister. And so I think she was bred to take care of Marston. She knew the kind of commitment it took, and and decided that this would be her job, and she attacked it just like she was attacking her entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So you have authored this book, Chris and yourself, and it's called "Educating Marston: A Mother and Son's Journey Through Autism." So I believe Chris wrote a lot. There's some things that you were in the book as well, but did she mostly write this book about just kind of her journey with Marston?
Yes, yeah. I mean, she mentions me and talks about our stuff. I wrote three of the chapters,
Mm-hmm.
but it's mostly, her journey, and it actually starts out with talking about her mother and her sister, and it goes through the therapies. She felt that she wanted to help other families kind of navigate it, because, being a physician, I think it's simple. It's always tragic when a kid is sick, but if your son goes to the hospital and he gets diagnosed with leukemia, everybody knows what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You have leukemia. You're going to meet the oncologist. You're going to meet potentially, the radiologist. You're going to meet internal medicine. You're going to meet the pediatrician, and they're going to walk you through, chemotherapy and everything, what happens, how long it's going to take, and what we expect the survival rates are. From A to Z, all you have to do is show up, and the treatment is planned. But when you have a kid with either ADHD or on the autistic spectrum, they slap you on the back and say, you'll need to look into therapy.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no universal game plan
Mm-hmm.
for kids on the spectrum.
Mm.
And so you're left wondering, where do I go next? What do I do? And so she wanted to kind of summarize how we attack the plan for the mothers and fathers that are going through it. And then I think she speaks to the emotional issues of what's going on for for the siblings, and for the grandparents, and aunts and uncles, so they kind of know what their families are going through.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When I was reading the book, it talked about that your son looks normal, right? And she also talked about some of the movies out there. I think there was it Wander? There was the Eating Gilbert Grape movie. Some of those movies where, um, and I wanted to ask you this too, as a plastic surgeon. I'm sure that you have worked on kids or people with deformities and things that you could help with and you could maybe even fix, right? Or remove. And this is something that you couldn't do that with. So what was that kind of feeling for you as maybe a man too, like wanting to fix it? Was that like
Right,
super hard, especially as a plastic surgeon and a doctor?
right. Because I think that, certainly the child with cerebral palsy, the kid in the wheelchair, they're easy to see they're different, and it's easy to make allowances. The kid that looks normal but maybe doesn't speak or acts a little bit differently, or acts crazy, everybody, A, gets nervous and doesn't want to interact with them,
Mm.
tends to shy away, and they don't actively participate in a social, network. It certainly, we saw, even though he was trying to stay in school, at the time, the birthday party invitations and, the mommy and child classes, that kind of all dried up, to the point where, he was in a Montessori school and they told him he had to leave. When, Maria Montessori came up with her whole plan, you know, on how to educate people by first starting with special needs kids and figuring out how to get through to them.
Yeah. I have a friend with an autistic son. I think he's about 13 years old or so, and he got invited to a birthday party. And he's 13 years old, and the parent got really emotional about that
Oh, it's
because that
crazy, right?
because that was the first birthday party that he's ever been invited to, you know. And
Right,
that was just something normal families, I guess, can't really relate to that for sure.
right. And then I think you're right about men wanting to fix women's problems, or any problem, and it's one you can't fix, and it's one you have to manage, and so you end up just saying it's going to be all right. We're going to figure it out, one step at a time. And that's all you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, when I was in the military, they always said, we don't leave anybody behind. And so that was our motto in our family. We
Mm-hmm.
don't leave anybody behind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's easy to do, right? If you have a child who is a little bit different, maybe to put them so they're not a nuisance, possibly. I'm sure families do that, and they don't mess
Right,
up the birthday party, right? So don't have them go, right?
right.
Um, so let's talk about maybe some action steps that you guys took, and you guys are impacting other families as well. So what were some things that you started to do to help your family unit?
Well, I think the first thing when this was happening, there was no Google, there was no internet. And so it was hard to get information. So that was the first thing is, you know, the nice thing about me being a doctor is I went to, obviously medical school. So I started calling my classmates, ones that were pediatricians, one that were, psychiatrists, ones that were neurologists, and start asking questions. Where do I go? Where do I go? Where do I go? And then I felt comfortable taking him to the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, to Children's Hospital of Miami. We went to Boston Children's, and you just you know call up and say, "This is my child who looks at kids like this," because autism wasn't that common then. But I think the first thing is to try to find people like us in your community,
Mm-hmm.
and we asked around, and so pretty soon we had a group of probably five core parents, that formed a club that nobody wants to be a member of, that their kids have autism, and as they learned something, they would tell us. As we learned something, they would tell them. For a new parent now, I think that the best thing to start would be the school system, because the school system probably always, has, speech therapy and occupational therapy, and then you can branch out from there.
Yeah, definitely. So community, I think there was one even chapter that was titled Chapter 8, Stronger Together. And you talk a lot about that. And I'm sure you and your wife felt alone at first and isolated and didn't know anybody else who had this, and everybody else's families looked perfect, and you didn't know what to do. So one thing is you recommend is getting some sort of community, getting a group, so you're not feeling alone and isolated.
Correct. It was interesting, going back and looking at it. Even my parents, stopped visiting us and started visiting my brothers and stuff. We always would joke they would,
Yeah.
drive up I-95, head to North Carolina, but not take the exit, to our
Right.
house. But,
That's
but,
funny.
but, and I don't want to throw my parents out there, but it was difficult. They were older, and my son could be difficult, and I'm sure it scared him, and
Yeah.
and and it scares other people. But if you're just compassionate, and the key is to always remember you and your wife are on the same team,
Hmm.
and to include the children,
Hmm.
because certainly, my son would bring friends home, and Marston would be Marston, and they would either have to accept it or they wouldn't be my son's friends.
Hmm.
But now it's amazing, you know 25 years later is those friends still look up Marston. My son lives in LA, 3,000 miles away. But, when we bump into somebody in Target or they see Marston, they remember Marston as a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old. And they come up and say, hey, and interact with them and take them to a movie or something. So it really kind of bonded everybody.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, and you started talking about this a little bit before the show, but as you mentioned, there's not just a lot of things on autism. I think you even said in the book that it didn't even date like that many years ago. It's not like some of these other diseases that there's all this research on, and I think all the time and every year, and they're trying to find out more information on the brain. The brain is such a magnificent thing that we all have. And so talk to us about, as a doctor, what you have seen, because I'm sure that you've been researching and other doctors have been researching this, and what's some things that you're finding out?
Uh, well, I'll take you back a little bit further. And there was a couple of things that struck me just being in medicine. And the first is I took helped take care of an unfortunate kid at the time who was on the University of California, I think Berkeley track team, and he was at a track meet, and the hammer toss, went awry and hits this kid in the head, crushes his skull. By the time he gets to the emergency room, his skull is open, brain is coming out, blood's everywhere. I called the neurosurgeons. They said, get him up to the OR. We'll be there as soon as we can. So, I shave his head, I prep him, I get him ready. They come in and take care of everything. But I saw him, for weeks. He was in a coma in the ICU, and I was just making sure, that he was okay. I talked to his parents, and then, to be honest, I moved on and, was just doing my thing. And the sports pages in the old San Francisco Chronicle used to be green. They were called the green pages. Mm-hmm. And so I was reading the green pages one Sunday morning, and there was an article about him that he had graduated and was doing well. And I couldn't believe it, because I would say at least a third of his brain was taken out at the operation. Wow. And so I called, my friend, the neurosurgeon. I said, what happened? He said, man, he was in a coma for 2 months. He woke up, he started therapy. And right now he's completely normal, except a little left arm weakness. I mean, that's it. So I kept thinking, if there's a kid walking around with only 2/3 of a brain, and he's a functioning member of society, my kid, who's got a full brain that's just somehow not right, ought to be able to get fixed. Right. And that was my mantra, And the other one is not that important, but I took care of somebody who was shot through the arm, and a couple of nerves were transected. And, I fixed the nerves, and, he shouldn't have been able to move his hand. And like on post-op day 3, he started moving his hands. And everybody kept telling me, you must have misdiagnosed him. These nerves couldn't have been cut. And I'm going like, no, I was there. You weren't there. I was there. These nerves were cut, and now, they're working. And when we studied him with an EMG, electromyography, other nerves had kind of taken up the function of the nerve that had been transected. And so I'm going, if the body can figure out another way to do this, then my kid should be able to get fixed. Mm-hmm. And blind people, they can do Braille. If you run your hand on Braille, you can't tell there's 24 little nubs. But when they do that, the back of their head, their occipital lobe, where their eyes are supposed to go, that lights up. So they're using what used to be the part of the brain for vision, now goes to their fingertips. And that's why they can do it. So early on, I knew the brain was very plastic. And I knew that there had to be some way to mold that brain to essentially fix the problem or modulate the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's what we started to do. We made a big list, Chris and I did, of what his strengths were and what his weaknesses were. And, his weakness was talking. His weakness was walking. He had difficulty breathing because his chest wasn't developed. And we just started picking one of these off, once a week. We'd make a phone call. We'd try to find somebody. And we found, a wonderful group of people. We went to a place in Pennsylvania called the Institute of Human Potential, which, regular doctors kind of think it probably borders on crazy. But, I went there and I spoke with the founder, a guy named Glenn Dolman, who had really no formal education as a doctor, but, had a professorial position at, like, a medical school. And that's because in World War II, a couple of his friends were shot in the head, and they both survived. And so they came back to his hometown, and he ended up taking care of them. And he started writing down what it took to take care of them. Pretty soon he went into physical therapy. And then he, kind of founded the whole school of neurorehabilitation, just from, this post-World War II experience of his. And so I had him evaluate Marston, and he gave me a program, and he told me about other people. He had trouble with vision. We had written that down. I made a phone calls. Finally, I found this guy who, his name was Harry Weiss. He ran something called the Visual and Conceptual Development Program in Washington, D.C. But it turns out he evaluates all the eyes at the NFL Combine. He's the one that figures out, if when an NFL quarterback or a presumptive draft pick could put a pair of glasses on that distorts his vision and throw a beanbag in a garbage can, how long does it take him to figure out he's got to trust his mind and not his vision? So here's an upper level guy that understands how to make eyes work. And so he gave us a program, and we just kept one after another. And I think one of the things that I would, tell our audience is obviously this can be expensive, and my insurance didn't cover it. But the one thing I did do was I went to our local University of North Florida. I went to their Department of Education, and I just asked for a list of students who are going to become special needs teachers. And I just started calling. I said, who wants a job? And I found, some young men and some young girls who went up to Pennsylvania and learned this program, who went to Washington, D.C. and learned this program. And so, for 10 or, $12 an hour, they would come into our home and do this with Marston, which would be much less expensive than taking him to a professional occupational therapist or something like that, and paying $100 a visit. And they were actually learning and becoming better, teachers, or eventual teachers. And we were getting somebody that had a passion for it and ended up, loving our child.
Yeah.
And so
I love that. I mean, it sounds like you guys were really intentional and just very innovative, right? I mean, it's like you figured out a way, because a lot of times people, they're just like, oh, this is the cards that we were dealt, and we'll survive, but it's going to be really hard. But you guys are really just going after it. You're going out trying to figure it out, problem solve it, and get the most help that you need. Yeah. And like you said, just that special needs, I wrote that down. That's pretty genius.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you saw the movie The Martian.
Yeah.
At the end he says, you just keep solving problems. And that's what we did. We would say, we would define a problem, solve a problem. And obviously you can't make it normal, but you could say, okay, he's got visual problems. We found the guy, we found the program which was going to help. And then we found Crystal, a girl in our neighborhood who was interested. She was going to go to pharmacy school. She needed a job at odd hours that she could pop in for, a couple hours during every day. And so she went up there, learned the program, brought it back down here, and taught it to our son. And so there was plenty of people like that. And so we would just, see a problem, solve a problem.
I love it. So, a couple other things I just want to kind of go, what's it like? I mean, you're running this business too, and most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, real estate investors, owning their own business, things like that. You have one chapter, I think it was your very first chapter in the book. It's called Life in Fifth Gear. I think I can definitely relate to that, and a lot of our listeners can relate to that too. Like, we're going 100 miles an hour, especially as business owners. And so what did this kind of experience, this journey, parenting your son, what did it do to your pace of life? What did it do just kind of to that dynamic as a business owner?
I, it's difficult, because I was going in so many different directions. And so I think the good news was Chris stopped working, and so she could pick up the slack. But I knew that on Saturday and Sunday it was my job to pick up the slack,
Mm-hmm.
and not rest from working 16 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and then emergencies that would happen. But make sure she got her rest. If I had to go in the hospital in the middle of the night, I would take Marston with me, because I could always find a nurse or somebody to watch him while I operated. And what I did was I involved, my staff. I don't have a huge staff, but obviously they knew me, they knew my wife, they knew my child. And so I would just say that, we're going to have to do this. We're going to end a half a day early, but we're going to come in on Saturday and just knock this out because I can't be here that day. And they were all willing to pitch in, which was nice.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Um, And then you talked about marriage, right? That something like this
Mm.
and raising kids in general can be really taxing on a marriage, but especially with one with special needs. Uh, because all your focus kind of goes to your child. And so, what did it do to your marriage during this time? And how did you guys kind of, right, encourage each other and stay together?
Um, I think we were very intentional. And actually, it's probably a good thing. My mom was a marriage counselor. And nobody wants a mother as a marriage counselor. I can tell you that right now because she asked some crazy questions. But she would always say, before you were parents, you're a husband and wife, and actually before you're a husband and wife, you're a boyfriend and girlfriend. And kind of remember who you were, be intentional, find babysitters so that you have a standing date night. Friday night's yours, Saturday night's yours. One thing that she told us to do was, there was always one vacation as a family, but there were two trips, for just you and your wife,
Mm.
where you would go away for a long weekend or something and let somebody manage the kids so you could reconnect. And then we just made it intent. Even sex, we made it intentional. We said, we're going to try to do it, on this day at this time, whether we feel good or not, because that's what bonds the marriage. There's a lot of physiologic things. I mean, obviously, everybody likes it, but women release oxytocin, at that time, which bonds them with their mate, and men, I think, aren't the worst, greatest communicators, but that's an act of love and intimacy
Hmm.
that forces togetherness. And so I think you have to be intentional, which certainly takes away spontaneity, which everybody wants. But when the bullets are flying, you got to be intentional.
Yeah.
You just can't let life come to you, or it'll just blow past you. Especially with any kids.
Hmm.
Think of 3 or 4 kids running through the house. You never have time alone
No.
unless you actively say, we're having time alone.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. And you can be spontaneous. In other words, you can still have it planned, right? But
Right.
obviously, that's good. That's awesome. So this book, guys, get it, Educating Marston: A Mother and Son's Journey Through Autism. I just want to ask about Marston today. Like, what's kind of going on and what's going on
He
now?
he has made incredible strides, and we talk about that in the book. But if you would have told me 4 years ago he would be living by himself and driving a car, I would say, from your lips to God's ears.
Mm.
But he is. And in Jacksonville, we were blessed when Wayne and Dolores Weavers sold the Jaguars. They used some of that money to build something called the Art Village. And it's a gated community, 38 homes, all for special needs, adults. And so it's almost like assisted living,
Hmm.
but for kids like Marston, from Down syndrome to autism to other issues, brain injuries. And so he has his own place. There's a mentor, which, stops in a couple times a week to make sure he's doing okay. And you can get on different programs where they come in every day or they come in, twice a week. And they coach them on life skills. They have activities for them and things like that. Uh, and then he learned how to drive, which took a long time.
Mm.
But part of the book, or especially the book that I read, that I think that really helped him was that he was treated with umbilical cord blood are umbilical cord stem cells. And I think that's the biggest um, uh, boom in autism treatment, probably in the last 3 to 4 years.
Mm.
And most people don't know about it, but there was a call from the NIH. And first, we don't know what causes autism, and that's why it was such a big issue. It went from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 52, and so it's very common to have a child or know a child on the spectrum. And so the NIH kind of put the word out, let's try to find, some fresh brain samples of kids that were on the autistic spectrum. Because one of the hardest things to study the brain is you just can't biopsy it, and our brain is different than any other mammalian brain. So they found some children over the course of about a year that all had died from other causes. There were car accidents, cancer, house fires, things like that, and they got the opportunity to study their brains, and they found out that all of the brains had neuroinflammation, and that is very common in many degenerative neurologic disorders, from chronic traumatic encephalopathy that the NFL players get to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, as well as ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. So it started to fit into a scenario that we had some research on, that, these kids with autism have, inflammation. And then as soon as they found that out, they took a bunch of kids who were living and did spinal taps to see if their spinal fluid had evidence of inflammation. And they did. They had these chemical mediators which showed they were inflamed. And so we knew from stroke research that umbilical cord blood has the ability to not only turn off neuroinflammation, but to turn on a neurorestorative phase. And so it had been being done by Neil Reardon and his group in Panama for several years, but really wasn't accepted by the mainstream medical community until it was done at Duke. And that was done, I think, in January of 19. They published where they took 25 kids with autism. They studied them, they made them take tests, gave them their own umbilical cord blood, and 60% got significantly better with just a single dose. And that kind of exploded, well, what's happening? And stemmed more research. But what they actually showed through MRIs is, because we know that there's deficits in the brain of kids on the spectrum, that their brains actually normalized. They grew more neuron connections. So before, when they had a paucity of connections, especially in the speech area, and couldn't talk, after they got these stem cells, they started to speak, and they had more connections. And the more you speak, the more connections you get. And so it's truly an amazing discovery.
Yeah, man, this is awesome. I mean, I'm writing down all these notes here, and so I guess, would you recommend? And I don't know that much about this, obviously, but when someone has a baby and they say, "Hey, would you like to keep the umbilical cord blood?" Right? Like, is this kind of what you're mentioning? And then does everybody do that now, or it's just kind of an option?
No, it's probably less than 10% of people, because there is a charge. It's about
Yeah.
$2,500 to bank the blood, and then there's a yearly charge to keep the blood.
Mm.
The interesting thing about umbilical cord blood and umbilical cord stem cells is that they're obviously very new in differentiation, and they're kind of generic. My wife says they're generic cells. They haven't expressed self yet. So, my son got umbilical cord blood from a donor, somebody that wasn't banking it for themselves, because you can donate it, just, because it's truly medical waste.
So it
So
wasn't
women,
even your own son's.
no, not at all,
Wow.
not at all, because when he was born, that technology hadn't existed.
Yeah.
And so right now, if you're having a baby, I would suggest everybody, have theirs. But if for some reason you're not going to bank yours, or you don't have the financial means to do it, if you ever need it down the road, you can still get it. It's always best to have your own, but you can get somebody else's. But you can donate it. The hospital would say, "Would you like to donate it?" Because there's public banks of umbilical cord blood. You don't hear much about bone marrow transplants anymore, because the oncologist, to figure out how to reconstitute an immune system for leukemia with umbilical cord blood. And so if you don't have a bone marrow match in your family, You just go to this public bank and they can look at they're called HLA types, but they look at the antigens, which determine self, see which is the closest match, and it just gets shipped to the hospital and gets injected into you, and you're off and running. And so there's probably 50 different diseases now that are treated with umbilical cord blood.
Wow. Awesome. That is awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Weiss. I really appreciate it. One last question before we go into the last section of the show is one of your guys' missions now is impacting others, other families and parents and kids, with disabilities or autism. And I think your wife even said she's dedicated her second phase of her life to helping those with autism and disabilities to live life to the fullest. So talk to us about like what's your mission and what are you trying to do with the book, and go from there.
I think the mission of first, the mission was the book. I think Chris, sat down and said, I'm being pushed in my mind to write a book. And I'm going, I think if nobody reads it, it's nice to summarize your life, and kind of see where life has taken you. But I said, my wife was a note taker, we have notes, labeled, March 12th, noon, 1998, and so she was able to put together this book. But, from all the different therapies, the ones that worked, the ones that didn't work, and she's researched now where you can get the therapy. So the book is actually, even if you don't read the book, there's kind of a manual and there's a list of therapies and how to get them, from speech therapy to occupational therapy to reading therapies, all sorts of stuff. And so I think the emotional message of the book is that life can go on and you have to be a team and this can be overcome. And the practical method is that it's a wealth of information.
Love it. Awesome. Guys, go check out Educating Marston, A Mother and a Son's Journey Through Autism. And the best place for them to get that book, I got it off Amazon. Is that the best place, Eric? Or
Yeah, Books A Million, Amazon, Target, all those have the book.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So check that out, guys, today. I appreciate it. Eric, I like to end every show with a little fun, and I just have a few questions for you. This is called Fun with Eric. So,
okay.
These answers, they can be super short, less than a minute long. Just have some fun here. So the first one is, what's the oddest thing that someone has ever asked you to have plastic surgery on?
The oddest thing that does. I don't know if we can talk about that on a family show.
I didn't know.
But there's all sorts of things people want to improve, but it's an interesting field,
All right, sounds good. It goes back to the sex thing, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So so obviously you've had stress, and this whole thing has been stressful for you too, but what's one thing you do to de-stress? Like, what's a relaxing thing for you?
I love to go to the beach, and just, take a walk or just hang out. And I think it actually, Marston loves it too. We would go to the beach together. I think the waves for kids on the spectrum are somewhat therapeutic. It's very concrete. They can go out there and stand, and it comes and it comes and it comes, and they just like that sensation. So I just like to go and sit out in the sun and drink a beer and ponder life, like to fish as well. But that's what I do.
That sounds good. I know that for me too, my son really loves the water. So the beach, he loves that, and swimming. It's just something about the sensation of the water. It's awesome. All right, number 3, what's the best thing about owning your own business?
Well, you know who the boss is, because sometimes I make decisions that might lose money, but it's what I want to do. It either makes my life easier. I could do with something cheaper and not, but it makes my life, easier or better. And especially plastic surgery, because sometimes people come in that need an operation and can't afford it, but they need it. And so I have a great group. I have a good relationship with my hospital. And if I call them and say, this person needs this operation, he's a migrant worker, he's got a big, skin cancer of his neck. If we don't get it off now, it's only going to get worse and eventually kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing it for free. My nurses are going to come do it for free. I expect you to donate the operating room and the anesthesia.
Mm.
And certainly, having been in the community for 30 years and having goodwill with the hospital, they are accommodating. And so that's nice, is that it allows me to take care of people that for one reason or another don't have insurance or couldn't afford it, and I don't have to, because when you have somebody like my son, he's not going to be able to fend for himself, and he's going to be on Medicaid, and I don't push people off who have issues because I've lived it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Love that. That's a really good answer, by the way. Sounds good. All right, last one. What's the best thing about your family?
Always, we're a team. We still have fun together. We still, the kids still come home and want to go on vacation or be at home for Christmas. Now, none of my boys are married yet, so that might change things. But we have fun together. We started a thing called Fun Day Friday when they were in middle school. So we would rotate between the boys. They got to pick what we were going to do Friday night, and it could have been, pizza in a movie or Top Golf or something in between. And, the girlfriends would, end up coming, and then soon nieces and other nephews would show up for Fun Day Friday. And so it kept us as a nice unit.
I like that. That's cool. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show today. This is a wrap, guys, with Dr. Eric Weiss. Make sure you get the book, Educating Marston. Again, A Mother and Son's Journey Through Autism. Thanks a lot, Doctor. I know you got a plastic surgery coming up, so let you get to that. Yeah. But thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. And I appreciate your platform and for helping us get the word out.
Yeah, no problem. Take it easy, okay. Eric. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.